Hello and welcome to Cinema Express. Today we have with us National Award-winning non-fiction filmmaker Samarth Mahajan, the director of the documentary Borderlands, and Nupur Agarwal, the associate director of the documentary, which just screened at DOK.Fest Munich, one of the oldest European film festivals, and the recently concluded New York Indian Film Festival as well. The film was selected for the MAMI 2020 under India Story category, but unfortunately, the festival had to pull the plug due to the pandemic. And now we'll have a little conversation about the making of the documentary. So before we get to the documentary, let me give a brief introduction because it's possible that many of you might not have seen it yet. So Borderlands is a documentary that embodies the impact of geopolitical borders that India shares with its neighbors through intimate conversations with six distinct individuals, each hailing from a different corner. Hi, Samarth, hi, Nupur.
Hi
Hi
Ram,
Ram.
so glad
I
to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you as well. So I love the documentary for its intimacy. Although you're talking about these massive concepts like geography, politics, which are way beyond the control of individuals, the film was still he was a very personal and intimate story. So congratulations for the film. My first question would be to both of you: when and where did this idea stem from?
So I'm really glad you liked it, Ram. So I'll tell you about the genesis of the idea. I come from a border area myself. I come from this town, Dinamani. You would have seen my mother is one
Yeah,
of the
I did.
characters I've actually shot in my hometown.
Yes.
So ever since my childhood, whenever I would go out and I studied outside my hometown, I studied in Chandigarh, then I went to West Bengal to study. So
Hmm.
whenever I would talk to people and tell them that I come from this place which is 10 kilometers from the border, people would get very fascinated. And
Hmm.
slowly I realized that people have a very distinct idea of what a border area looks like. Whenever you say border, the first thing that comes to people's mind is army,
Yeah.
terrorist, conflict.
Yeah.
At the same time, when I would come back home and I would like sit with my mother and talk about things, then that would be a wholly different world. And uh, and with time, as a person who has some sort of knowledge and who's following some sort of events, you see that these borders became a tool for politics. Like they became political tools, right,
Hmm.
to
Hmm. Hmm.
divide people in some ways, or to create an image of the other. Like whenever you say border in India, the first thing that comes to mind is Pakistan or Kashmir,
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. And even when you see with Bengal, the whole conversation is to throw out immigrants, so illegal immigrants. So the
Yeah.
idea is that okay, we are always talking about the other. So so that is, I think, the point where it struck me that because these borders have become such political tools, there is this completely different dimension, which is the personal dimension. Beyond the external politics, there's a personal politics. These The whole image, it sort of
Hmm.
does not capture the everyday experiences of people. So that is where the idea stemmed from. But definitely, one of the experiences which affected the idea was also during Unreserved. The Unreserved, which was my previous film,
Yeah. I did watch it.
about
Great film.
thank you. So we were traveling in general compartments throughout India. So we had this conversation with a Kashmiri, and this Kashmiri talks about, first two lines of conversation, he's like, I support Pakistan. And
Yeah.
the fifth line of conversation, he's like, my brother is in the CRPF. He is with the armed forces. So I was so amazed. And then he talked about how if he gets a job and his village gets electricity, he'll probably start supporting India.
Yeah.
So this complexity, as a mainlander, you imagine very binary identities. This complexity of identity really intrigued me. So that those were like the motivations behind why I wanted to do this film. But Nupur can tell you about how she got involved with the
Yeah,
film.
like I really have a few questions for her. Like, can you explain about the logistics of the film? Like, when did you start filming this? How did you get the permissions and all? Because there are a few points in this film where you're capturing the border and everything, and I assume they are not as simple as just going there and shooting it. There must be a lot of paperwork and all this involved. So, how did you pull all those?
I'll first tell you, like, answer your first question about how I came across this project and
Yeah.
joined it. So for me, it was more about discovering Samarth and the idea both together. And very interestingly, I was right before the project. I was actually backpacking across India, South Asia for 18 months. And so, very like interestingly, the people I would find on my journey, especially the tourists who have actually come to travel around India. So nobody, like, especially since they're international tourists, nobody would be allowed to go to these border areas, right? You have different regulations, different rules to actually go to these border areas, as if these border areas and regions are hidden from people of other countries. So
Yeah.
that was an interesting thing to note. And I would myself also, everybody would tell me about going to Kashmir. Oh, it wouldn't be safe. About going to any border, even when we like started thinking about shooting this film, and whenever I would talk to my relatives or friends, and they would be like, no, 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 the border is not safe. Like please take care. So that idea of the border which people have. And then when I actually discovered this project, when Summer told me about it, when I read the concept note and I read that okay, we'll be exploring uh, exploring beyond this notion of the border in the mainstream narrative, of how livelihoods get affected, how we also wanted to explore faith, so these themes actually intrigued me in like getting on board this project. And yeah, so that's the
Okay.
first. Yeah.
So,
Logistics and
with
yeah.
a concept as expansive as this, how did you zero in on these six individuals? Or did you have more profiles, but you chose to keep it to these six? Or were these the only six right from the beginning? How did you zero in on them?
So actually, it was a very expansive process to zero down on find our ultimate characters.
Okay.
Like if I expand on the motivation, one of the motivations was okay, we're talking about cross-border violence, and we're not
Hmm.
talking about violence that these borders cause on people. So we were looking specifically for stories where this whole impact of border was clear.
Okay.
At the same time, we had divided our shoot into different parts. So we shot in four parts. So we first shot across along the Pakistan border, then the Bangladesh border, then Nepal, and then we went to Manipur. So
Okay.
with every phase we had a pre-production phase. And what we would do generally was that Nupur and I would just read a lot of internet articles, web articles, go through a lot of journal research, like
Hmm.
academic research,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just identify leads. So, for example, there's a story about a shelter home in the film where you
Yeah.
have a lot of Bangladeshi girls who are awaiting repatriation, and they've been rescued from trafficking.
Yeah.
So we got the lead from a scroll article actually. So we read that article, and then okay, then Nupur's expertise comes in. Nupur, why don't you expand on your thing? Yeah.
Yeah, so as Samad said, the first step into our pre-production would be to research a lot, and we always discuss the kind of stories that we want to bring about, so that we have a direction. So after researching and actually finding out internet articles which pique our interest, what we would do is like contact these journalists who have written these articles, and all the names that are mentioned in the articles, we would try to talk to those people. So for example, in this particular story, there was an NGO involved in this case, which would do the rescue and the facilitate the repatriation process. So our next step would be to find out more from those NGO people, from those journalists who have written about it, so that we know, okay, is there a narrative there, and after getting a little bit of understanding, we would then our next step would be to actually gain access, because that is very important for any documentary film. Like, you have a good idea, but do you also have access? So that becomes very important. So we start building relationship with these people who would then help us, on ground during our recce, to actually then meet our potential characters. So building relationship was very important part of our pre-production process. And then gaining access. So trust and access are two very important things for any like to bring out these intimate conversations that
Yeah.
you see in the film now. So that was important part of the pre-production. And then once we are on the ground and during our recce, our first step would be to meet these people, these same people, either these journalists or these NGO people, without the camera, and actually giving them this chance to understand us first, who we are, what are we trying to do. We are not from a news channel, like, clarifying all those questions, where would this go. And then so slowly taking it from there and building this trust, and then meeting our potential characters. That would be then our the most important part, where we don't want anybody to be intimidated by us or the camera. So
Yeah.
So we would like, in this particular story, since we knew that these girls are from Bangladesh and their native language would be Bengali, and we wanted to do it in a language that they are comfortable with. So from very before, in the pre-production stage only, we would actually recruit and another direction associate to be able to do these conversations, and we would get them on board, not just with the idea of the film, but how do we want to tell these stories, because it wouldn't be like somebody translating these questions but leading these conversations. So it was very important for them to understand what kind of story we want to tell. So then, like, slowly that person will also be part of the team during our recce, and we together will meet our potential characters. And we would often do multiple interviews. Like, you see one character in the film, but behind that there are probably, like, 5 6 more girls in the same shelter home we have interviewed with, and then finally one girl could made it to the cut. So yeah.
There are two things which I'll add to Nupur's answer. One is that during the pre-production itself, we were looking for stories which were not there in the mainstream. Like, if you see, whenever you talk about the India-Bangladesh border, there's a lot of conversation on trafficking actually. But how we were looking at trafficking was more from the lens of, okay, once someone is rescued from trafficking, how do borders complicate those people's life? Like the idea of rehabilitation, confinement. A lot of people don't know that, okay, trafficking itself is such a tragedy. And once you get rescued, your process of going back itself is so complicated. You take 3 to 4 years. So we were interested in how does someone cope with that idea. This is like one example, but in every story we were looking for new perspectives on how do borders impact people's lives. And the second thing is on the, like Nupur described, the role of local direction associates. So you have stories in 5 languages in the film. We obviously don't speak all these languages. So from the very beginning, we knew that we don't need and we don't need translators, because to bring out true empathy, you need that connection between the person who's leading the conversation. So from the recce itself, these associates would join us. So they were building their relationships. I was trying to just infect them with the feeling that I wanted in the story. But it was like a lot of teamwork. So our direction team is actually like five different people. Like 2 of us are sitting here, and 3 of the local associates who helped us in Bengal, Manipur, and Nepal, they were also there.
So when I was about to begin the documentary, I had a preconceived notion that this was going to be a sob story, because such is the subject matter, right? The borders have always been associated with tragedy, loss, and it's true in this case too. We get to see people having been, whittled away from their families, but at the end of the day, it's a hopeful story. It doesn't end on a sad note. Was the idea of finding hope in this distressing issue, was it there right from the beginning, or was it something that you found while making the documentary?
I think it's something that was at the back of my mind. But to be honest, we found it while on shoot and nurtured it on the edit. Like, we did
Okay.
have characters who had stories which did not have that element of hope. Like, but on the edit table, what we realized was that they were just not gelling with the narrative. Like you talked about, were there more characters? We actually had a lot of characters when we came back with the material, but we realized that, even as storytellers, the kind of political climate that we live in, it's a very hopeless climate sometimes. And I, as a storyteller, don't like telling stories which don't, leave you with a certain emotion that, I am a firm believer that every single human being is working towards happiness. They are trying to find some sort of hope in their own lives. Can we bring that out in the narratives? And even on the edit, that became our guiding light. Because we had someone, like, till a later stage, we had 7 characters in the film. But one of the characters, he was not, he was, sometimes you just state the problem and that doesn't go anywhere, right? So it was more like that kind of a story. And every time we would watch it, we would like, he's not fitting in. So, so yeah. So I think we did end up with characters who are finding hope in the direst of situations. One more thing I think with respect to hope, I want to add is that when we were looking at these borders, there are definitely political borders, but we were also looking for personal borders. And when I say personal borders, it's basically, say, something to do with identity or marginalization. Like we touch upon issues of sexuality, disability, gender throughout the film. So we were also looking at those factors. And yet, somehow, because you asked this question, we did not start out with this notion, but on the shoot, people led us to that fact that they were how they were coping with these borders, and that on the shoot itself was very inspiring. We were surprised, at
Wow.
least in the shelter home. Like you hear the song, right? Even in the trailer, Ami Tumake
Yeah,
Bhalobashi.
yeah. Lovely,
It's a
lovely
song.
lyrics. Yeah.
It's a song composed within the shelter home, and the first fear
By those girls.
by
Yeah.
the girls who are living inside the shelter home. And the first fear we had, as these filmmakers who've come from Bombay to shoot inside the shelter home, we were very afraid because we thought that this is going to be a very intense, sad space, because the kind of story that girls have. But I felt there was so much life in that shelter home, and the moment we heard that song, I think it just gave us a completely different lens of looking at all of them, because it seemed to me that they were all very excited about their life after the shelter home. How are they looking at life inside the shelter home? So it allowed us to look at them in a new light.
Wow. Now that you had mentioned that the documentary forged itself on the editing table, or you forged it on the editing table, what was the rough length of the footage that you ended up with?
I think we had around 120, 130 hours of footage.
Wow.
We shot for about 1.5 years, and lot of kachra shooting also. The thing we realized is that, like she said, at every location, because the moment you get into a conversation, you don't know if that character is going to open up, if that
Mm-hmm.
person is going to open up. Obviously you had this relationship building exercise. One of the things we used to do during that was tell them that we are not Z News, we are not any mainstream media. We are uh, independent filmmakers. We are not going to live stream your interview. We are
Yes.
not going to do anything. So there was this trust gaining exercise. But
Okay.
sometimes just with the presence of the camera, people become shy. They don't open up. So
Yeah.
just to avoid that whole emphasis, like this one character has to work, we would shoot with 4 or 5 characters. So that's
Wow.
also why there was a lot of footage. 120 hours was the footage.
And even like we visited so many diverse borders, but at the edit table 6 stories made it to the cut. We had stories we attempted which didn't make it to the cut, so there were whole stories of like so many hours of footage which did not like make it to the film. So
Okay.
yeah.
So one thing I had noticed, the similarity that I have noticed between the unreserved and this one, Borderlands, is that there is a conversation about films and the impact of cinema as well. If you remember in Unreserved, there is a long stretch towards the end with Rajinikanth, MGR, and how their stardom is entwined with politics. And similarly, you have here Manipuri filmmaker talking about how he wants to preserve his culture and life through films. So did that happen naturally because it's so meta? Because that's exactly what you are doing with this film, because these are stories that are rarely captured on film, and people are inside the film, they are talking about films. So was that a conscious decision, or how did that happen?
There are 2, 3 things which I think honestly these are subconscious things. I don't think I planned for it, but I'll tell you 2 more things and then expand on this. Uh, the film opens with a train, and the last film was about trains
Train,
in
yeah,
general. So
yeah,
trains are a theme which have sort of reoccurred. Even the Manipuri filmmaker, the film that he's showing 2 brothers who are, who have friction, because one of the Manipuri brothers is in the police and the other
yeah,
person is the infiltrator, which is also again, it really relates to the Kashmiri part in
yeah,
Unreserved.
yeah.
Uh, but I think it's more to do with just the fascination, like, or the situation. Like in Unreserved, I was actually, when I shot the Rajni story, I was in the south,
Yeah.
like southern part, and I didn't know any local language, and my only cultural bridge happened to be Rajnikant. So that was the constraint there. And here I think the cinema came in more because Manipur's cinema in general has a very interesting relationship to the mainland. Like they have banned Hindi films at some point. and we found this person who was telling important stories through films. So it seemed to fit in into what we were doing with Borderlands, and the connection is sort of it is subconscious. It's not something that we decided. Okay, we'll have something about cinema this time.
Okay.
But cinema looked like an interesting lens because we weren't talking about direct politics. We didn't want to talk about geopolitics as such. Cinema provided a very soft lens to look at conflict in a way.
Now, taking a slight digression from Borderlands, I just want to know how hard is it to fund an independent documentary, and did the national award help in any way?
So I think it's fairly difficult to fund an independent single doc. Like there is a budding market, at least in OTTs, for non-fiction series also now. So one of the co-producers on Borderlands, who are Camera and Shots, so they released Alma Matters on Netflix, which is a non-fiction 3 episodic series, right? And we are seeing more and more demand for that kind of content. But at the same time, a single film documentary, I still think it's a challenge. How we coped with it was we crowdfunded a lot of the budget. Like there are two producers involved. There is Camera and Shots. There is All Things Small also, which is a startup which came up last year, I think. So there are two co-producers who definitely put in financial resources. But we did crowdfund about 30 lakhs to do the film. That's how we started actually. And most of that money was raised through our campaign, and the whole, I think, the legitimacy came from the national award. If we did not have the national award, we wouldn't have been able to build a legitimate campaign which would ask for that kind of money. And whenever during a crowdfunding campaign, you're talking to so many people about your campaign, telling them what are you trying to do, it really helps that your past work has been recognized. uh, I do think that it allowed us to dream bigger also. Like right after Unreserved, I even thought that maybe I'll stop making films. Maybe I should get into academia. I should become an anthropologist or a sociologist. And the moment we got the national award, so Ashay Gangwar had produced Unreserved. He's also co-producer on Borderlands. And the moment we got the national award, and he flew down to Delhi to attend the ceremony, he's like, let's do something bigger, let's, like, we've gotten this award, let's do something with it. And that's how this Borderlands was already in our mind. But because it's a project with a certain scale, Unreserved was like a 3 to 4 lakh rupees project. So
Yeah.
we couldn't start imagining how will we fundraise for Borderlands. So I think that's how like the national award became the element of hope in our narrative.
So I was personally disappointed when it was announced that Mami was cancelled last year, and I can only imagine that filmmakers like you being disproportionately disappointed by the cancellation. So tell me, how important are film festivals for filmmakers like yourself? Both of you can
I
answer.
think they're very, very, very important. I think for films like ours, I think they are the places where we can introduce people to our films. Uh, those are the places where like I reached out to you only because my film started going to festivals. So these are the places where we can start talking about our films, getting some reviews out, and letting people know that our films have arrived. And also in some ways they are curated events, right? So
Yeah.
they allow you to present yourself as a curated experience. That okay, we made it to Mami, so people will take notice. So I think in that sense they are very important. A lot of the films, like that I have seen at Mami, over the past, me, even if they did not get a release, they left a big impact on me. So at least for cinephiles, it has a special place on its own. A
Yeah.
lot of the people, they make films for themselves. These are personal films. They are not concerned about a widespread release, but what they're looking for is to connect with few people who are ready to put in that effort. So film
Hmm.
festivals, are those places where even if a person has made a very personal film, it can screen and it can touch some people. So
Yeah.
for that reason itself, I think they're very important.
I think film festivals also become very important for an independent filmmaker because as a step for distribution, because that's where people who are actually interested in buying independent films will look for. Like there's no organized platform or a space or a community to go to for somebody who's looking to buy. So
Yeah.
film festivals also become that space, to go see what new films have come up, and actually then to connect, to start conversations with filmmakers about possible distribution. So I feel, like it's very, very important.
Now that we are talking about film festivals, are there any personal favorites or influences that uh, you have in terms of documentary filmmaking in recent years? A film that inspired you a lot, or a filmmaker that influenced your film? Both of you. Yeah.
So I am really affected by few films. So one
Hmm.
of them is Talking Heads by Kieslowski. It's
Hmm.
I think a 15 to 17-minute documentary available on YouTube, and it's just about people sitting and talking to the director, and the director is asking only three questions: What's your age? What do you do? What is important to you? And it's all talking heads, so that the film is also called Talking Heads. And there is this general aversion in the entertainment industry about documentaries which are just talking heads
Yeah.
with people
Yeah.
just talking.
Yeah.
So I was really affected by that film, and when I was making Unreserved, it was a big impact. And Unreserved is all talking heads.
I can see that. I
So
can clearly see that. Yeah.
and even in Borderlands, you see a lot of the narrative is hinged on interviews and conversations. I really believe in the power of conversation. So that film really made me believe in it. Apart from that, I think I'm really affected by a lot of Iranian filmmakers, especially Abbas Kiarostami, Jafar Panahi, and Mohammad Makhmal Baf. Because the way they mix reality and non-fiction, the way they treat non-fiction.
Hmm.
There is this film called Salam Cinema.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the premise of Salam Cinema is just that okay, this person has decided to hold an audition. It's the 100th anniversary of cinema, and like 20,000 people come in, and then the whole film becomes about the auditions itself.
Yeah.
So those the whole idea of flowing with reality and then mixing reality and fiction really affects me. So I really like that. What about you?
Wonderful.
So, so fortunately or unfortunately, I like it's the reality that we are not exposed to documentary films in India as much as we are exposed to Bollywood films, right? So my introduction to documentary films started with Ashay and Samarth. I knew these people from my college, which is IIT Kharagpur, and so when they like the Unreserved was the first documentary film which I watched, and got to know that there is a genre there, like in filmmaking, which is completely new. So, and like these people then like introduced me to documentary filmmakers around the world. So apart from the names that he took, like the Iranian filmmakers, Abbas Kiarostami, Mohsen Makhmalbaf, and other than that, there's Werner Herzog, his films, because he also makes anthology films. So yeah, so these are the same people, like which is inspired to okay, there is much more out there. And when like during working on Borderlands is when we were collating these databases of grants and film festivals, is when I started knowing okay, there is a much like bigger world out there for documentary filmmakers. Otherwise in India it seems like okay, there are only these few.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
So
unfortunately that's
one of the best things about documentaries, or where it has an edge over feature filmmaking, is that it's unfiltered, right? It's all real. The pain, the happiness, the struggle, it's all real. Even the impact is real. We have seen documentaries changing people's lives. So in that sense, what do you think will Borderlands mean for the humans it portrayed? Like, I would really love to know what Noor is up to right now, the girl from the shelter house. So can you say anything about that, the impact, or how it's going to impact it?
I think with at least my films, I am usually more pragmatic with myself on the kind of impact I want to create. And usually the way I look at impact is that if I am able to take this film far and wide, people who are probably going to be in positions of power, their perspective towards these issues will change.
Hmm.
Uh, like with Unreserved is an exercise in empathy. I was usually in the train for 4 5 hours, and many times I wouldn't even exchange numbers with people. So, but after watching that film, there is a Udia guy who's working to cure, raise money for his daughter's treatment. The
Wow.
daughter has tumor.
Wow.
So a
Wow.
lot of people came to me after the film and asked me, can I connect them to this Udia guy? And I did not
Wow.
have the number. I did not have the number. So what I would suggest them is to go to Milap or any such platform, because a lot of people are usually raising money to raise
Yeah.
money to cure their kids. I was like, this is a cause, because many times what we are covering in our films are representative, like people are representative of a very larger reality. Like there are probably 20,000 people like that who are facing the same issue. So the way I look at impact is to change mindsets. With our film, we are still in touch with Deepa. So Deepa is the character who's come from Pakistan.
Yeah.
She is still waiting for her plus two results. We receive messages from her every day. She's also
Wow.
like waiting for the results, and her journey is about, she wants to become a nurse, a doctor. So that's the journey she's on. So we are hoping that she's able to take that next step. Out of the limited people who watched this film, we've actually received interest from some people who want to support her education.
Wow.
So,
Wonderful.
so that is the kind of impact that we are looking at. With Noor, we are not in touch because she doesn't have access to a phone directly. Like she's in confinement, and ever since we finished shooting in March 2020, so we've not been able to travel to meet her. But we do plan to like visit the shelter home again and ask about her whereabouts. That's the plan.
As alumni of IIT Kharagpur who are now making films, can you? Is there a piece of advice for the upcoming engineers who are just starting out to make in the film industry?
I think the biggest piece of advice is to lose your sense of entitlement. I think, as especially as IITians, or at least as IITians, there's a lot of sense of entitlement. Okay, I am an IITian, and I am supposed to be treated like a king or a queen. I think that has to go, because this is a different industry and your approach is very personal, and it's a very raw and honest approach that you need to have. And I think the second thing is to be humble about your knowledge. Like, it's very typical for engineers to give funda and philosophize about the most random things, right? We like to act as if we know everything, but we genuinely don't, right? We don't know about a lot of socio-politics about our country, basic things like gender, caste, class. We just don't have any idea. So it's important to educate yourself either through conversations, through reading, or watching films. Films are a great tool to understand that. And once you're in sync with ki, okay, this is the India in my head and this is the actual India. Once that friction starts, no, that is when the churning of ideas starts, at least for me. So that's my two nuggets for engineers who want to be filmmakers. Nupur?
Yeah, so I think I'll talk from my experience. I feel that engineers and especially IITians, who want to explore a new industry, be it filmmaking or any other industry, I feel that the biggest thing that they can do for themselves is give that exploration, like time for exploration and experimentation. Because coming from like being that kid in the family who has always been acing results and being first in class and then cracking JE and then getting placed in an IIT, like after IIT getting placed in a very high salary jobs, you always have that pressure of proving yourself to be best in whatever you do, so you don't give yourself that space to fail. So that at least happened with me, where you not ready to accept that it's okay to fail in something that you're going to try now. So I think give yourself that space and time. So when I backpacked for 1.5 years, I think it was that time which I just took for myself, where I'm not tied to any institution, be it parent, school, or a college or a job. I actually just enjoyed, it's actually really important to enjoy. So just give yourself that freedom for 1.5 years, take that gap year and just experiment, be it filmmaking or whatever you want to do, without expecting a lot of results out of it. And then I guess it will slowly lead you towards, the real, like, guide you towards a path for a career, new career,
Wonderful.
which is like brave in itself. So, yeah.
Wonderful. So, Samarth and Nupur, thank you very much for this. I really hope the documentary finds a means for public exhibition. I would love to watch it on a big screen at Mami this year. And I can really foresee this being a great title in movies catalog. So, I really wish it happens as soon as possible. So, once again, congratulations on the film and all the best. All the best. I really
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Ram.
much,
It
Ram.
was
Thank
lovely
you.
talking to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
really
Thank you so
enjoyed.
much.